Hi there, everyone. We made it to Friday. It's 4 o'clock in New York. The reviews are in, and the summit between Donald Trump and China's leader Xi Jinping was a huge success for China. Donald Trump's profound political weakness is now on full display for the entire world to see as Donald Trump leaves China largely empty-handed and parroting the talking points of China's authoritarian leadership. During the trip, Donald Trump took to his favorite network, Fox News, for an exercise in flattery.
We have a friendship, really. He's a tremendous leader. He's been here a long time, very powerful, very strong. There's no doubt about it. I say about him that if you went to Hollywood and you looked for a leader of China to play a role in a movie,
central casting.
He's central casting. You couldn't find a guy like him. Even his physical features, you know, he's tall, very tall. I'll get criticized. They always criticize me when I say good things about certain leaders, and this one. But he's a leader for China. He's led almost 1.5 billion people for a long time, and he's respected.
He's respected, and he's so handsome. He looks like he's at essential casting. He's, quote, powerful and strong. 27% of Americans agree with that assessment. 27% of Americans approve of China. But Donald Trump's man crush on Xi is so deeply felt by Donald Trump and now on public display that Trump went beyond complimenting the leader. He even parroted and agreed with Chinese propaganda about the decline of his own country, the United States of America. Donald Trump posted this on social media, quote, when President Xi very elegantly referred to the United States as perhaps being a declining nation, he was referring to the tremendous damage we suffered during the 4 years of Sleepy Joe Biden and the Biden administration. On that score, he was 100% correct, end quote. Trump went on to list a litany of complaints about America and culture war grievances, things Donald Trump has said many times before, but not after being in charge of the country for 18 months. That post appeared to be in response to President Xi referencing the so-called Thucydides trap, a theory in which war erupts when an existing power is threatened by rising power. Instead of defending the United States of America, Donald Trump threw in with China's dictator, agreed with them in his assessment and criticism of his own country, and then tried to spin it away as the result of the policies enacted by his predecessor, who, as we said, has been out of office for a year and a half now. All in all, Donald Trump's post underscored who clearly, undeniably, came out the winner of the summit. On that, David Sanger of the New York Times writes this, quote, Trump sounded conciliatory, the exact opposite of his portrayals of China in public appearances back home. Mr. Xi, while smiling and welcoming to Trump, was quietly more confrontational, especially on Taiwan, where he delivered an unequivocal warning. The gap spoke directly to the new level of confidence and authority Mr. Xi has adopted in his public speech, despite his challenges with the domestic economy as he watches the United States plunge into conflict with Iran. Donald Trump leaving China on the defensive and empty-handed is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. New York Times reporter Michael Crowley is here with me for the hour. Political analyst and host of the Bulwark podcast, Tim Miller, is back. And back with me at the table, what could go wrong? Puck News senior political columnist, national affairs analyst John Heilman is here. Michael Crowley, you and your colleagues had an incredible live blog running, as well as some great reporting and analysis. I read some from David Sanger. And I honestly, I was homesick, and I kind of kept updating it to see if I was missing, like, the good news part of the trip. It was a pretty abysmal outcome for the United States of America and Donald Trump.
Well, Nicole, I'm just really marveling here at the point that you struck in that intro, which is the change in the president's tone toward China. And, you couple that with the fact that he launched a war in the Middle East with sort of unclear objectives that was aimed at regime change, a regime change war in the Middle East. And then went to China and praised its leader and took a pretty soft line approach toward the U.S.-China relationship. It's like, makes me wonder what's going to happen next. Like, is Trump going to, give Hillary Clinton a job in his administration? It's just kind of amazing how flexible this president has become, to use a charitable word, or how dramatically he's reversed some of his past positions. And just as a footnote to this, although it's not Trump himself, I stumbled on something really interesting, which was that in 2015, Marco Rubio gave a big speech about China, attacking President Obama, and he stopped just short of saying that Obama should cancel a visit from Xi Jinping at the White House, because Rubio was saying that Xi was, committing atrocious crimes against humanity and oppressing his people, but said, Obama should not roll out the red carpet, and basically not, treat him like his good buddy, because that's not how we treat authoritarian leaders like this. So, Rubio is part of this here also, and it's quite remarkable. Now, the last thing I would say is, look, if there's good news here, it's that we are not on the brink of a dangerous confrontation with China. I mean, a lot of people that national security experts were worried that we were in this kind of cycle of escalating rhetoric and threats between Washington and Beijing that could spiral out of control. And at least we're talking, because there are so many important things, including AI, where we've got to be on the same page. However, last point, the warning about Taiwan from Xi Jinping was kind of chilling. That remains a very dangerous flashpoint, and it's not clear to me how President Trump is thinking about that. So that remains a huge question mark out of all of this.
I mean, Trump said about Taiwan, would we want to be in a war 9,500 miles away, almost the same distance as Iran? I think people who watched Taiwan found the summit most ominous for the prospects of the Taiwanese and our alliance with Taiwan. I mean, doesn't this make actual aggression there far more likely or far more palatable from Xi's perspective?
Yeah, it may well. It's an incredibly complicated issue, that involves, among other things, this chip manufacturer on the island that no one can afford to see heavily damaged or destroyed, because this one, the whole global economy basically depends on this one factory. But maybe if Xi Jinping thinks that President Trump is not going to put up any kind of a fight, he can roll in and take it, and that makes it safer. I do think that what the president says and what he would actually do in a circumstance like that might not be the same thing. I just think it's very difficult to predict. Having said all that, I think that people in Taipei have got to be pretty freaked out right now about how President Trump is messaging, because you'll recall on several occasions when President Biden was asked what he would do if China made a move on Taiwan, Biden broke with official U.S. policy, which is to remain ambiguous and to say that he would come to Taiwan's defense. The White House walked it back, but Biden did it 3 times, which led me to believe that Biden was kind of playing a little bit of a wink and nod game there. Definitely not what Trump is doing.
Let me show you, because we're at a moment where Trump's approval rating drops a little bit every week, I want to show you how sort of the culture shapers assess the trip. This is from The Daily Show.
President Xi said that he hoped the two countries could avoid the so-called Thucydides trap. It's a historic reference about a great power being threatened by the rise of another.
Damn it, Xi! You're gonna hit President Trump with the Thucydides trap? Now you're making his brain go up a flight of stairs. Come on, all right, President Trump, don't let this guy history mog you. Show him you can communicate in equally sophisticated terms.
Chinese restaurants in America today outnumber the 5 largest fast food chains in the United States, all combined. That's a pretty big statement.
Yeah. That's my president. Putting his understanding of geopolitics into fast food terms. He gives a summit speech like a 3rd grader who got assigned China for his geography project. In conclusion, China is a land of contrasts, and I brought Panda Express for everyone.
So, Tim Miller, I think before Donald Trump started a war for which 9 to 17% of Americans feel supportive and enthusiastic about, these could be read as sort of elite things that Trump doesn't know anything. I think that now that his ignorance of geopolitical dynamics and his weakness on the world stage has cost the lives of 13 American service members and a war in Iran for which there's no explanation, no articulated end game, and gas is going up by the day. I think his weakness on the world stage is a different political calculation. How do you see this trip sort of fitting into an increasingly troubling narrative for him?
And Nicole, we're singing from the same hymn book like usual today, because that's exactly where I was going to go with this. I think that because of what is happening in Iran, like the whatever you want to call this, confab, the summit, the non-result of the summit is actually worse than what we just laid out, right? Like if you removed Iran from the equation, it would have still been a pretty humiliating summit. I mean, Trump ran on being a China hawk. He's got a lot of alleged China hawks around him, like Mike Waltz and Rubio, et cetera, as Michael Crowley pointed out. And instead, he goes there and just basically lies prostrate before Xi and talks about how hot and strong he is. Honestly, if you can imagine what Fox would do if any Democratic president would talk about this, or just minute by minute, it would just be about how weak and humiliating and embarrassing the president is. And that's what our president is. He's extremely weak in the face of this negotiation. And so, like, that would be one thing if we were talking about, like, big picture, long-term geopolitical concerns, Thucydides trap, what happens with Taiwan in the future. But, like, we have this acute crisis right now. And China is simultaneously helping Iran somewhat in that crisis. They're also providing assistance to some of our putative allies in the region that now are dealing with shortages, in gas and other, products such as that because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. There have been multiple articles by Mike's colleagues at the Times and Wall Street Journal and others about experts about how China is taking this moment of our demonstrated weakness in Iran to kind of increase its footprint around the globe. And so, like, Trump goes there for this summit with kind of like the Iran war, with no clear objective, doesn't get anything out of it, and it happens amidst an ongoing conflict that we started that is exposing us as being very ineffectual on the world stage, and on top of that is harming people in our country and abroad. So it's just a total disaster class as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I think, John, this is in league with betrayals of his own base. Right, like I think that we could have warned that he was not. If you're not strong with Russia, it's very hard to then have a totally different posture with China. But here he is reversing on his own promises to his own voters. This was Trump in 2024 about the issue of Chinese buying up farmland, and then I want to play it immediately with what he said last night on the same topic.
Going to protect it by saying you can't come. You can't do it. We don't want you buying our land. We don't want you taking the land and basically taking it off the market. And we don't want you doing it. And they're buying at levels that nobody's ever seen before. We don't want you buying. It's very easy to do. That's a very easy thing to do. But it's causing a lot of disruption, and that's what they want to do. So we can do that very easily.
The issue of Chinese students in our universities, more importantly in my mind, is that Chinese nationals have been buying up thousands and thousands of acres of farmland, ranch land, and land near military installations. Now, I would assume I'm in Beijing. If I wanted to buy property near one of their military installations, I don't think President Xi...
No, they wouldn't let you. I don't... Look, it's not that I love it. You want to see farm prices drop? You want to see farmers lose a lot of money? Just take that out of the market. But they've had a lot of land for a long time. Obama did nothing about it. They bought a lot of it during the Obama administration. He did nothing about it. As far as the students, it's 500,000 students they come, good students. I could tell them, I don't want any students. It's a very insulting thing to say to a country.
Again, leave whatever you think of the substance of those two positions aside for a moment. This is another reversal to the Trump base, for whom these issues are almost coded and imprinted and part of the Trump package that he is reversing himself on these two big issues on China?
First of all, I'd like to know, how would you feel if you were the staffer who had to brief Trump or explain to Trump what the Thucydides trap was?
Yeah.
It's like absolutely the least enviable job in the history of White House staffing. He's like, Thucydides?
Yeah.
Is that good for us or bad for us?
I'm guessing that was Rubio because he has every other job.
The other thing is just, I don't mean to be like a fact-checking scold, but there is something telling in the Trump thing about how she is unusually tall. She's like 5'9", which is about an inch taller than the average Chinese, which is 5'8". American average men are also 5'9". So his whole thing about how the Chinese are unusually small is a kind of weird, like, some Asian stereotype that Trump has, kind of a pan-Asian stereotype with all the Asians are kind of small. I mean, it's just a weird thing. We're all basically in the advanced economies, which China, Japan, and America now are. They're all basically the men are all basically the same height, and it's not like she's
the same height as Trump.
He's not. He's the same height. He's not like Yao Ming or something. And Chinese. There are in the north of China, there are famously tall people like Yao Ming. So I just find it hilarious that even when he's kind of gushing over Xi,
he's slurring.
He's making up, he's slurring, and he's also making up this thing. Oh, he's a colossus, Sean, and Sean Hannity, who's sitting over there going, central casting, sir, central casting. It's so gross. And it actually, all of this gets to your point, because that post on Truth Social about responding to Xi, he starts the post by saying, as President Xi so elegantly put it, he's got to do a little glazing on the way into that. I think that Dan Pfeiffer wrote a piece in his message box column this week, which was basically the one thing that Trump has always had as a superpower is strength. Projecting strength in a way that at least his base understands. In a lot of cases, that's dominance. In a lot of cases, that's stuff that we don't think is really strength.
Right.
And bullying, all this stuff that's kind of ugly. But his thing has always been a very deep understanding of, for his voters, what looks like strong. And the old Bill Clinton thing about strong and wrong being better than weak and right. He's now lost that. And the polling shows that overwhelmingly, that he now looks weak. He obviously looks old, he looks more confused, he falls asleep, all of that stuff. But that all feeds to this picture. And I think the kind of buttering up, the constant glazing of Xi is another example of that. Nobody looks at an American president, even if he hadn't made these promises about buying up the farmland. I mean, those are betrayals of the MAGA base. But for most people, again, ordinary voters, what they see is America losing a war against a second-rate power in the Middle East, which over the course of less than 3 months has already depleted American stockpiles down in this really dangerously, perilously low way. And then we move on to we take the show on the road to try to take the focus off Iran. And what you have is the president kind of bowing and scraping before Xi Jinping and doing all of this stuff that just codes as weak. And if Donald Trump loses the ability to project strength to anybody who's open to voting for him, he really almost has nothing at that point, because that is the main thing that he's always had.
And projecting weakness to a country with only 27% of Americans have anything favorable, to say or feel about them.
Entirely, yeah.
Entirely. All right, no one's going anywhere. There's much more on this story coming up. Also ahead for us, take. Donald Trump taking another payout from the federal government, one that Trump says will go right back to protecting and propping up many of his own MAGA allies. We'll get to that rather extraordinary and explicit example of presidential grift and corruption ahead, and later, more on Trump's failures in China, coupled with how his war in Iran has weakened him at home and abroad as well. We'll talk with a veteran intelligence officer, our friend Sue Gordon. We'll get to all those stories and much more when Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Massive, and like they weren't very well prepared. And, I think that does ring true. And as a data point, that person said that President Trump didn't say much of substance. We also know that there really haven't been any significant deliverables as we conventionally understand them, big signature announcements that come out of a summit like this, which are usually rigged up well in advance. So it makes you wonder a couple things. Number one, is the president and the White House team overwhelmed right now by the situation in Iran, and were they able to put enough focus into this trip and effort and preparation? Have they been thinking enough about it? And, yeah, look, President Trump turns 80 in about a month, and he has shown some signs of aging and appearing tired. And although, obviously one is hesitant to try to, diagnose or scrutinize someone's health from far away, President Trump has invited this kind of speculation, and I think, lowered the bar for it through the way that he talked about President Biden through Biden's terms. So, any evidence that President Trump is slowing down, looking older, having trouble in meetings is going to be pounced on, and I think with a certain degree of fairness because of the way he has set the context for that. And so that was another part of this trip that I think a lot of people have found underwhelming.
Tim Miller, Michael Crowley is always accurate and steeped in deep reporting, but diplomatic. The idea that the American people, including Trump's own voters, are being fed this sort of slop. This is, a presidency in sort of a political death spiral that is now bleeding into hurting America's standing on the world stage. And the idea that right-wing conservative media is so flaccid right now, that this thing that it's cared about since you and I have been alive, conservative media has cared a lot about America's posture toward China. The idea that most of them sort of just shrugged, that Hannity just sat there and didn't say, whoa, wait a minute, what are you saying? Like, of course this stuff matters, is such a sign of sort of the hollowness and the stupidity that they think their own base is sort of permanently wrapped up in. The idea that their voters aren't going to see through this is embarrassing for their voters.
It is. And just shout out to Michael Crowley. We need some diplomacy on the panel. I mean, it is.
100%. I love
we
it.
are discussing a summit.
Here.
We're discussing a diplomatic summit after all. But look, it is humiliating. And you're right, Nicole, that the conservative media has been so flaccid and pushing back on it. But even like the small little bits of pushback that we've seen, a lot of this has come from the conservative media. Like this, for example, that story about the 500,000 visas for Chinese students. I do believe it was a Daily Caller reporter a couple of months ago now that was really pressing him about this in the Oval Office. And I'm kind of surprised he didn't fold on it. It's just, to me, it shows like he is totally out of touch. This is a piece of what we're talking about a lot, about on the economic issues where he doesn't care about Americans' financial concerns. And he seems to have kind of given up caring, about the specifics of this stuff. And the specifics that he does care about are, what kind of marble is going to be in the ballroom. And you can see in Hannity there, he did not push back. It was not a strong interview. It's not a real interview. It was agitprop. But he's trying to push him there. He's trying to be like, this is a little bit strange that we're letting the Chinese nationals have all this land and bring all these students in when you're not allowing any other immigrants in except for the white South Africans. And it's like, Trump just goes back into his Obama shtick. We're in Fat Elvis territory where he's like giving the same talking points he was giving 10 years ago. And, I do think that like there's this escalating element of things, of betrayals to the MAGA base. And I think that the response, I think a lot of us wish it would be anger and rage and betrayal and wanting to, but instead, I think it's kind of like this disassociation and a loss of momentum for a presidency that like doesn't really have any juice right now, but unfortunately has a lot of power.
Just to Crowley's point about deliverables, which he made diplomatically, you've been on foreign trips with the president. Crowley's been on a bunch. I've been on a bunch. Tim, I'm not sure how much foreign travel Trump's done in a presidential context, but these things are the deliverables are always wired up. Reporters know well in advance what the deliverable is going to be.
They're like written before you leave.
There might be extra things, but the whole point is the summit, we must have deliverables, right? And there were none here. The only mild deliverable was Trump announced on Hannity that he had gotten the Chinese to buy 200 Boeing jets. And he said, they thought they were going to get 50 or maybe 100, but I got 200. Wall Street was expecting 400 to 500. And when he announced that on Hannity, Boeing stock fell 4%. That's the one deliverable was something that was he portrayed was a big win, but in fact was less than was expected for Boeing. And the Chinese to this point, I believe, and Mike Crowley will correct me if I'm wrong, the Chinese have said basically nothing. I mean, the humiliation here is that, Trump's like, well, we talked about Iran and we agree about this. And Xi Jinping's like, didn't say anything about it. It's just kind of is letting him twist in the wind without deliverables over there. They're not claiming any deliverables. They basically said, come to Beijing and bow and scrape before me, and then we are going to kill you with our silence in terms of any of the normal things that a summit partner would do. Well, the U.S. got this, and we got this, and of course we're going to work with them in a bilateral way. Even talking points, nothing. Just brutal.
It's brutal. Maybe it was the comment about Chinese restaurants. Which, again, I know no one here is numb, but in a normal time, that would be something people would talk about for days because it's so bizarre. Michael Crowley, we will name you our chief diplomat. Thank you for being here today. Tim and John stick around a little bit longer. Up next, Trump's latest shakedown of the American taxpayer coming into sharper focus today. Billions of taxpayer dollars potentially coming in the form of a deal to reward Donald Trump's army of MAGA followers, including the hundreds charged in connection with the deadly January 6th insurrection. There's a lot more to unpack today. We'll get to it next.